Where's Steve? Oh, is he? I can't start without Steve. Let me read it, maybe before we start, a few of it. I'm always reading in this book called Love Poems from God. And they're poems that have been translated that date back, some of them, 1,500 years or more. And a lot of authors I'd never heard of, most of them. And, but this is real short, just a statement or a poem by a guy named Meister Eckhart. Lived in the 1200s. Anyway, just short. He says, "It is a lie, any talk of God that does not comfort you. It is a lie, any talk of God that does not comfort you." And I like this one, Myra, or Mira, M-I-R-A. And it's kind of a similar thought, but she's a little more poetic in a sense. It's called Mira Knows Why. The earth looked at him and began to dance. Mira knows why, for her soul too is in love. If you cannot picture God in a way that always strengthens you, you need to read more of my poems. I like that. Well, I was reading this book, and it reminded me, I was reading a book on levitation. Oh, I couldn't put it down.
You got another one for us, right?
Not much. Some are pretty. Some weeks are
They're just simple.
Some weeks you just do the setup.
Or stark, Yeah, but I was planning a trip next summer. With my job, I get some time off, so I'm planning a trip, and so I was reading online, and I wasn't really planning to go to Missouri, but I found out Missouri is like this big tourist attraction now. And then it dawned on me, Missouri loves company. So today was a 2-for-1.
Oh, good.
But welcome as always to the Love Your Life workshop. It's always important to love ourselves. You can always take that in the wrong way. You can always take that to the wrong degree. And we talk about that a lot. And we're not talking about looking at ourselves above others. We're not looking at ourselves as if we have no faults. And I think that for most of us, that's not usually the problem. We don't, most of us, I would guess, you're like me, we don't look at ourselves and think, I'm perfect. I'm better than everyone else. Now, we may struggle with that in certain areas, certain times. But generally, the bigger problem is that we don't think well enough of ourselves. And so when I have on one hand an idea that God loves me, God so loved the world that he, even when it was messed up, even though it was messed up, he said, what's it? The scripture, even as we were sinners. So even when the world was messed up, God loved it and gave his son. So, but yet sometimes we can walk through life being a believer, believing that we've been saved, and not feel good about ourselves. And it's like the story of the prodigal son. He comes home and the father puts the ring on him and throws a party, and the prodigal son sits there and sulks and says, I don't deserve this. And maybe he felt that. But how long does the father want that attitude to go on? And it's not a matter of saying, well, yeah, okay, I deserve this. It's a matter of humbling, accepting that. And last week we talked about a paradox. A lot of paradoxes, contradictions. Seeming contradictions. In a lot of life, a lot of great truths of wisdom are paradoxes. In what we talk about, loving yourself in spite of who we are, is kind of a paradox. How do we do that? But I think it's important. That we learn to love ourselves and become the person that we most want to be. Our higher self, we might call it. Become the person that we most want to be. And part of loving ourselves is taking care of ourselves. Jesus said, love God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind. So we take care of our heart, soul, strength, and mind. Or as Proverbs says, guard your heart. What's that mean? Guard your heart. Take care of your heart. Things that you do that divide your heart, be aware of that. Things that you do that tear your heart down, be aware of those things and the effect. Your mind, be aware of the things that tear your mind down, that feed your mind things that are not helpful to you, that keep you from connecting with other people, with God, keep you from joy. Anyway, I could go on and on about it, but once again, love yourself because God loves you. And as we learn to love and nurture our own heart, soul, strength, and mind, then we turn that toward other people and we treat other people the same way. And I find that as I strive to be the person I most want to be, which is a daily striving, but as I strive to do that, the only way to do that is with patience and humility. Patience with myself. And the more we are patient with ourselves, because God is patient, then it helps me be patient with other people. And so that's just what I found. All right, so here's what I want to talk about for a few minutes, is to practice living eternally in the moment. Practice living eternally in the moment. Another one of those paradoxes. We live eternally in the moment. Some of us spend a lot of time living in the past. We think about the past too much. We waste a lot of time thinking about the past. When we live in the past, we're often in regret mode. And truth be told, some of us have probably spent years of time in our mind regretting. Oh, if only I had fill in the blank, If only, and it starts when we're real young. If only when I was 5, I had, if only when I was 7, I hadn't quit Cub Scouts. Maybe I would have made something of myself. And we go, and it sounds kind of funny, but it's not because many of you have been there, or maybe are there. But we're in regret mode, or what if mode. Man, what if things have been different, But so we get up, and instead of living in the moment, we're living in the past. Or we live in the past thinking, boy, the past were the good old days, Boy, I had it good then. I've missed my chances. But all that's living in the past. We also sometimes spend a lot of time just thinking about the future. Not necessarily in a productive way. Here's a productive way we can think about and plan for the future. Imagine the future. Jesus even did that. And what we're going to read next week, I go and I'm going to prepare a place for you. He was getting them to picture something about the future. Not to live in the future, but to live eternally in the moment. But generally when we live unproductively in the future is we're in worry mode. You know, we're in worry mode, or we could be in one of these days mode. One of these days I'm going to get it all together. One of these days I'm just going to stop doing this. Not today, but one of these days. One of these days I'm going to get on a different path. Not today, but one of these days. It's always out in the future, one of these days, you know. And or we can just think about the future in a very fatalistic, negative way. It's never going to get any better. Things are never going to get any better. And but we still are consumed with the future, you know. Then sometimes we go back and forth, right? Sometimes we do both at the same time. It's a paradox, but we do it. You know. But there's also a destructive way that we can focus on the moment. I don't know if it's destructive, but it's not as wholesome way. But sometimes we can't think about the past. We can only think about the moment because we are in survival mode. You know? And I think we probably all have been there, or maybe you're there, in survival mode. And I think Jesus probably talked to a lot of people in his crowd that were in survival mode. And that's good to remember because he still said some things to them in spite of that. You know, but survival mode is man, all I can think about is my immediate need, what I need right now. I can't think about the past. I can't think about the future. I can't think about anything big. I can only think about surviving. And to some degree that's true at times, you know. That is all we can or all we need to think about. But survival mode, we can end up kind of living in survival mode mentality where we're only living in the moment and we're robbing ourselves of the sense of eternity. The sense of eternity. But what we want is we want to live eternally in the moment. And that's kind of maybe poetic or kind of hard to get a handle on. So let me kind of go into that just a little bit. And I was thinking about creation. You know, here God creates not only the earth and everything in it, but time. As far as we know, there were no moments. And that's hard to understand, isn't it? But even physicists tell us that if you go fast enough, time slows down. And if you go fast enough, there is no time. I think that's interesting. You know, if you go at the speed of light, you slow down. So if you could travel at the speed of light and go away and come back, everybody else would have aged more than you, you know, or they'd be gone. So if you travel fast enough, time stops. So, but the point is, when God created creation and man and the sun and the moon, and we had this, and now we have time, we have moments. So he created moments, and life is full of moments. You know? And then when he made man, he said, he made man to live in these moments. To live in you know, to take care of the garden, to take care of things, to take care of life, to go moment by moment through life. And yet it says with man he did something a little bit different. He breathed life into man. He made man in his image. He breathed life into man. Man was made with the spiritual. So man was made, we are made with this connection to our momentary lives, and yet with the spirit, with the soul. And so one way of looking at this maybe is how do we not only take care of our immediate needs, whether we're wherever we're living, but take care of our immediate momentary lives and focus on it in a productive way, and also stay aware of eternity, stay aware of God, stay aware of eternal realities and truths that lift me up and encourage me and help me deal with my momentary needs. I think about the feeling of maybe standing in front of an ocean, you know. You can stand in front of an ocean and it just looks so vast and huge, and like you can, I can kind of sense the bigness of the world and God, you know, when I stand before an ocean, and feel small, and yet at the same time feel big because we feel God's presence in a sense. That's kind of like eternally in the moment, you know, or stand before a mountain. I remember the first time I saw mountains was snow-capped mountains. You know, I was in awe. And you sense this sense of bigness about life, you know, and it was in that moment. And I was thinking about Abraham. You know, when God wanted to really express to Abraham something special about his life, that he was not just living moment to moment, and he took him out and showed him the stars. You know, and can you imagine? If you've ever been out a place where you can really see the stars, I remember Jack and George and I were at the Grand Canyon a few years back, and the sky is white, literally white with stars. And I imagine that's what it was like with Abraham. You know, it was before pollution in towns, and so he's looking at this white sky where you can't distinguish all the stars. The Milky Way really is this blob of white up there, you know? And he says, look at the stars. This is what your life is going to be. Your descendants are going to be like the stars, you know. Gave Abraham this sense of eternal, that he's part of something bigger. And yet he lives in the moment. What does he do? He follows God moment by moment with this picture of who he is. I think we each need that picture of who we are that's bigger than our moment, but that we live in the moment with that picture in our minds. And sometimes it's hard to grab hold of that picture when we have other things weighing on us. So I think it's important to recognize where our minds are. Okay, and recognize, you know what, I really do. I dwell in the past. I can't let go of the past. I have too many regrets. And it's not easy to get past that, but just to recognize that. It's good to recognize. I just live in the past too much. I hear God has forgiven me. Here I believe I'm a child of God. I'm made in His image. But I just live in the past. I need to let go of that so I can live in the moment. And I don't know that for some of you it might happen like that. You say, okay, you know what? I'm walking through that door. I'm gonna let go of the past. I'm gonna stop living in the future. I'm gonna stop living in worry. I'm gonna stop living in regret mode. I'm gonna somehow deal with survival mode. I'm gonna bring a bigger picture of who I am. I'm gonna think about Abraham looking at the stars. I'm gonna look up at the stars at night, or look out at the world in a beautiful day, or the sky, and realize in the middle of my life, which is difficult, and I'm living in survival mode, I'm also part of this creation that God has made. And He knows. He knows where I am. He knows who I am. And I don't have all the answers. I don't have all the answers for why everything happens in my life. I know some of it I cause, but not all of it. And some of it just seems to happen. You know, sometimes we just seem at the mercy of the economy. And sometimes we're at the mercy of our upbringing. Sometimes we seem to be at the mercy of the place where we live. Sometimes we're at the mercy of things that happen, like the people in New Jersey, New York last year with the storm that came in. You know, and changed so many people's lives. And yet, to be in those moments and somehow still remember who we are, and that God is real, and that He cares, and to connect, I think it helps, but I think we have to stay with that. It doesn't necessarily happen overnight, but if we stay with that over and over and over, I believe it does change our minds. You know, that Paul talked about us being changed by degrees. He says being changed from one degree of glory to another. And what I believe that we are being changed by our working out of this, the salvation that we've been given, by the Holy Spirit living in us. And one of those changes is slowly letting go of the past. Slowly letting go of survival mode, taking over our minds and our hearts and our spirits. Letting go of living in the future and worry. Slowly letting that go. It doesn't all happen overnight, at least for me. But I can look and say, I do see where things have improved. I do see where my thinking stops now, and I don't always think. I don't always dwell on the same thing. I do get out of it a little quicker. It's for our good. It's for our good. It's for the good of people around us. I know when I run a marathon, that it's this amazing event when it's done. And you have to have this big picture. You're not going to finish if you don't have the big picture, And yet, how do you run a marathon? One step at a time, in the moment. And if you're running and you totally zone out and lose track of the moment, you're going to lose your form. You may, you're not going to do well. You need to be focused on the moment, but at the same time, you can't focus on the moment without thinking about the big picture. And I think life needs to be that way with us in the way that we live. And sometimes the moment is painful. Sometimes the moment is painful. And but we keep moving with the end in sight, with the picture in sight, with the big picture in sight. Once again, I think about Jesus talking to the crowds. I think he was talking to people who live the way we do. Some of them were obsessed with the past. Some worried, and he talked about worries. Many of them were in survival mode, trying to figure out where they were going to get food, clothing. And what does Jesus have the nerve to say? Don't worry about those things. Your life is great. What does he say? Seek the kingdom. Now, I think that's one thing Jesus was saying was live eternally in the moment. Obviously, they needed food and clothing. I don't think he was saying don't try to get them. But somehow, in the midst of their lives, which were difficult, he says, live eternally in the moment. Seek the kingdom. These things will be yours. You'll figure them out. You'll get them. But seek the kingdom. Live eternally in the moment. When he was talking to people who were poor. In Luke, the verse is, blessed are the poor. In Matthew, it's blessed are the poor in spirit. Either way you look at it, he's talking to downtrodden people. And he says, you're blessed. Yours is the kingdom of heaven. What's that? That's living eternally in the moment. They didn't suddenly become wealthy when he said that. Their lives weren't suddenly changed as far as their station in life that we know of. But he was changing their perspective. As he looked right at us and said, if you're hurting, you're blessed because you will be comforted. In this relationship with God, you'll find comfort. You'll have an eternal view of the moment. Blessed, he said, those of you who don't have much in this world, who have very little, he said, you're blessed because you inherit the whole earth. When you go out, you go outside, the sky is yours. The sky is as much yours as anybody else. When you go outside, those trees are yours to enjoy. The air is yours to breathe. If you go to the Grand Canyon, it's yours as much as anybody else's to look at. Now, don't throw garbage on it, but take care of it, just like you take care of yourself. But the earth is yours. The stars at night are yours to enjoy and to be lifted up with. All the great things, love is yours to give. Nobody can take that away from you. And then he said to these people who were living in the past and living in the future, and many of them living in survival mode, he said, you're the salt of the earth. You're the light of the world. I don't know about you, but if some guy came in here And he said, hey, can we go out for coffee later? And he sat down across from one of us and he said, do you know that you are the light of this world? What would your response be? Do you know that? And you didn't hear a Bible, you never heard a Bible verse that said that. Forget the Bible for a minute. But he just says, or even if you did know, and he said, you know what? Man, you're the salt and the light of this town. Did you know that? I think I would be saying, you don't know me very well, do you? Are you sure you got the right, what are you talking about? But Jesus said to this group of people, the downtrodden people, the forgotten people, the people who were not in control of what happened, the people who were not the religious leaders, not the political leaders. He says, you're the salt of the earth. You're the light of the world. Now, what is that? That's living eternally in the moment. Because you have to accept that by faith. It's a paradox. I'm the salt of the earth. I'm the light of the world. What? I just get up and I have my little community and go about my business. So, but you're made in the image of God, and there's more to you than the sum of your physical parts. Now he says, you can lose your saltiness. Be careful. You can lose your light. You can hide it. You can be so overcome with just taking care of the moment, or missing the moment through worry or through regret, that you lose the eternal part of the moment. You lose this connection with God. You lose this connection with who we are and how great life is, even as we don't understand and we deal with survival. We lose that connection. We can't lose that connection no matter what we're dealing with. Because it doesn't matter who we are or what we're dealing with. That if we have that connection, that realization of who we are and what we're about, we are salt and light. We've all heard the stories. I've heard stories of people in the hospital dying who brought light to the whole hospital ward because of their attitude. Friend of ours who lost their son, who was one of Kirby's good friends. And, you go to his funeral, and I mean, they knew a lot of people, so it's tons of people, but this young kid who was told probably, I think, about 2 years before he died that he had a case that was like 99% sure he was going to die. And he said, okay, so I still have a chance then. So that's what you're saying. And he grabbed hold of that 1% and he fought, but not fought angry, but he fought by being, he never complained. He wrote music and shared music with other people. He lifted other people up. He was a light. As he dealt with talk about survival mode, he was a light. He was salt. And so we know it's possible. But we also know how it is to get beat down by our days. So I just want to encourage you, I think even Jesus, in the beginning of Mark, it says, early in the morning he went out to a lonely place and prayed. What was Jesus doing? He was bringing eternity into his moments. He was a human being as well as God, and he needed to replenish his soul. He needed to feed his soul so it didn't just become another moment, somebody else asking me to heal him, somebody else asked, here comes, there's enough, How did he do that? Do we just say, oh, he was God, it was easy? No, he was a human being. He got up early before everybody else and went out and fed his soul. I know we all love our mothers, but I have one of the most amazing mothers in the world. And one of the most humble people, and just this little woman from New Mexico, but who has been a light and salt of this earth. And I'll never, and she raised 7 kids, 2 of whom were adopted, who were black, which is not an easy thing to do in the 60s.